Welcome to the More Demand podcast, where we help you generate more demand for your products and services. Every episode we give you tips, tricks and tutorials on how to get the best out of your digital marketing. Less frustration, more demand. Here's your host Lawrence Howlett with this week's freshest tips.
Hello and welcome to the More Demand podcast, episode 31. Today I have with me Garrett Moon from Coach Edgell. He's one of the founders there, and Coach Edgell is a content and social media editorial calendar for marketers. Coach Edgell is in fact now one of the top marketing tools as seen on entrepreneur.com. And Garrett helps lead the product and marketing teams at Coach Edgell. He's a regular thought leader. He's a regular blogger and thought leader is what I meant. He's also really knowledgeable about content marketing and social media. And today he's going to help us take that next step from knowing that we've got to do content to actually doing content and then applying the 10x rather than the 10% rule. So I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to get Garrett straight on this show because it's a 40-minute call with Garrett today, and it is just ram-packed with value. So make sure you've got your pen and papers ready. If not, head over to the show notes at moredemand.co.uk/episode 31. That's episode and the number 31. And let's welcome Garrett onto the show. Hi, Garrett. Welcome to the More Demand podcast.
Hey, Lawrence. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure to have you on. So I wanted today just to help our listeners take the next step with their content marketing, because I've covered a lot of ground in the podcast about, why we should be doing content marketing. And I think our listeners now have a really good grasp on what they should be doing, but can't really take the next step to gear up in terms of doing content marketing. So I think that's where, you can definitely help out. So take me through a typical scenario with how to get started in sort of creating that content calendar that gets you started.
Yeah, well, that's a great question and a great place to start. I think I was just writing a blog post the other day talking about the stages of content marketing, in particular for startups and solopreneurs and marketers. I think there are different stages that we're all at, and there's different things that you want to focus on in each category. And I think what I would say in terms of a content calendar, where that really comes in, I think, is somewhere between the first phase and the second phase. I think the first phase is really just this, habit and this process of making sure you're publishing content regularly. And sometimes that means it's very focused and strategic type of content, and sometimes it just might mean you're publishing and you're working on and getting into that habit of making sure you're getting new content and something out there on a regular basis, probably at least on a weekly basis. But I think, once you started to have that habit, you need to start making sure that you're a little bit more strategic and your content is focused on the exact type of goals that you set out for yourself, whether it be a business, whether it be, as an individual, the type of things that you want to be known for, or become a subject matter expert in, or share the fact that you are a subject matter expert in it. So I think in those cases is when you want to start thinking about a content calendar, because the beauty of planning out your content ahead of time is that you're going to force yourself to think about it a little bit more. You're going to force yourself to be a little bit more thoughtful and strategic, rather than that situation where you just may pull up a blank WordPress post or a text edit document or something like that, where you have to start typing. In those cases, you're just going to write whatever comes to your head first. But once you start planning it out, you get a little bit more intentional. And I think that's the next step that a lot of content creators need to take.
Yeah, and that sort of focus that you need to start off with, how do you even start with that? So is that a case of, going through your buyer personas, knowing that, what sort of content and challenges, what challenges they have, and then what content to solve that? And then how do you sort of dissect that into, should we be writing blog posts or should we put more effort into ebooks and that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I kind of like to say, what is going to be the easiest way for you to create content consistently. Rather than there are definitely some things that you should be influenced by regarding your audience. Maybe your audience just isn't going to respond well or care or take the time to watch video. And if that's absolutely the case, then you should do it. Or maybe for your audience, video is probably the only medium that they're going to care about. Well, then you probably need to pay attention to that. But barring that, in most situations, the exact type of content, whether it be a podcast or a video or a blog post or an email newsletter, doesn't matter probably as much as the consistency in doing it. So in those cases, I usually say pick what you can do the best. Where can you create the best possible content, and execute on a very regular basis and at a high quality level. Okay,
so with that, what sort of cadence? So say I'm a one man or one person, I should say, marketing team. So I might be the business owner, or I might be the solely employed marketing team. So how would you divvy up your time to say, okay, I'm going to spend is 4 hours enough, and one blog post a week for a sort of smaller business, or to really take advantage? Should we be leveling up and increasing that cadence?
I've never really measured it in terms of like time spent on content. I've definitely made decisions. I can say one thing. When we back a number of years ago, when I was really doing my first blog that was attached to a marketing agency that I was running, I knew I had this habit of every single morning I would wake up. The first thing I would do would be write a blog post for the day, and I publish 5 times a week. And really, that's in the end what got me into content marketing in the first place, is just kind of getting into that rhythm. And I'd write all kinds of random things, and I think. Yeah, and I don't know, those probably took me a couple hours. They weren't really long, in-depth posts. It was just kind of whatever it came to me. I'd throw a photo on it, and boom, out it went. But I think, I don't know, I guess I really hesitate to say that it's the amount of time, because for my business, I don't know, what is that, like 10 hours a week or something like that. And as I slowly went along, I think what I ended up doing is shifting that frequency into, I would spend a day maybe writing one really high quality piece of content. And then you start looking at the metrics and the data. What's the result that I'm getting from 5 posts a week versus the results that I'm getting from one really great post a week. And for me, I got slightly more traffic, social traffic, with more posts, and but I would actually build more email subscribers, and in the end, I felt more satisfied doing one post a week. So I kind of made that shift, and it made sense for me. But I was able to do one really great post. So I don't think that there's any absolute right way, nor should we put a limit on the amount of time. I would say one thing though. I think a big error early on is we spend the time creating the content, and then once we're done creating it, we kind of run away from it. And I think what that means is we don't spend the time on promotion that we should be doing. Whether that be social, whether that be working on email lists, working on trying to improve conversions, landing pages, things like that, sometimes get forgotten, particularly when you're on a schedule to create regular content.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point that you mentioned, that you got more traffic coming through with more posts, but actually you didn't get as many conversions. So the longer form pieces got more conversions. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think particularly over time, because a longer form piece, if you could better structure it around a keyword or search traffic, they would actually be more likely to become evergreen content. And so that means that over time, it's probably going to get more traffic, and it's going to get more email subscribers. So one thing to think about here is that 5 days a week, I was sending every post to my email list. So every day I was getting page views from that email list, right? But they're already on my email list. So by going to one post a week, and it was simultaneously probably tweaking my topics and making them a little more focused at that time as well. So I'm doing a little bit better on search. I'm doing a little bit better on referral sharing on social media. And I'm doing some better deep linking or cross-linking with content. You're able to improve conversions just because your content's now being exposed to a wider audience. because it's better rather than just the same people over and over again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm looking on the Coach Edgell blog now, and one of the top posts on there is the ultimate guide to color psychology and marketing and a free color scheme as well. Now that has 77,910 shares. That's just insane. But if you go if you go and look at that bit of content, and I'll link up to it in the show notes, the post is just insane as well. I mean, it is some detail in there. We're talking thousands and thousands of words, loads of different, suggestions of what to do. And I'm just looking for the author citation. It is written by
Julie
Ashton.
It's Ashton did that one,
Yeah, and I mean that is just an incredible post. But spending that amount of time, I mean, that's not a 10-minute piece of work or a 2-hour. I mean, that is a sort of, I would say, 3-5 day piece of work, a guess. How do you sort of quantify putting that amount of time and effort into creating a blog post and thinking, is that going to convert for Coach Edgell?
Yeah, so one important thing to realize about that post, that's a great example, great one to talk about, because that was published last probably June or July. It's almost a year old. So that's 77,000 shares over time, but I can tell you that it's still, in 77,000 shares, that's a lot per week, even if you break it down for 52 weeks. That's been building over time, but it's consistently still a year later one of our highest performing posts in terms of search, in terms of social shares, and in terms of people's likelihood to share it once they come to our blog or refer it on Facebook. People share it directly in their Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups. You can imagine. A big piece of content like that, how often it gets shared. So I think, that's, you're kind of hearing a part of my story where we're talking about this blog I did for this agency I ran. That's a long, long time ago. What we did for CoSchedule was taking some of those lessons and realizing that if you invest into this really high-end, high-quality content, I mean, that piece of content, things that we've done to make that get 77,000 shares. We've used the CoSchedule headline analyzer. We've probably written more than 20 headlines and A/B tested a handful of them to see which headline combination, which keyword combinations would perform the best for that post. Ourselves at CoSchedule, we probably tweeted, shared it on Facebook, Google+, all of our social networks more than 100 times over the last year, continuing share it out, even though the post was published over a year ago. We've emailed it directly to our email list, and we've been very focused on building a strong list using our blog since day one. We have almost 100,000 subscribers. I think we're somewhere between 80 and 90 in that list. So we have a nice sized list. Granted, when we first published that post the first time, our list was a fraction of that, maybe 20,000 or something. But the other thing we've done is we've probably gone over that post once or twice and reworked the content slightly, meaning that we've gone through it and improved keyword ranking for certain phrases and topics. We've probably refreshed the graphics. I know we have a really nice infographic in there. And we have a full-time graphic designer, Ashton, who actually wrote that post, who made that graphic. So we invested in the graphics. We probably reinvested in the graphics and added things that would be things for people to be able to download once they came and visit that page. So that page would continue to deliver traffic, would continue to get social referrals, and also drive email signups to the site. So, it's it's important to see a piece of content like that as sort of this living content that's been invested in heavily, but repeatedly over time.
Yeah, and that's a really important point, that evergreen content that you're going back to and just tweaking and changing, maybe as you say, updating some keyword focus or some of the content, and then you're actually not just pumping that content link out or that blog post link once. You're then creating multiple different ways to share that. I think I read on another one of the blog posts was, the first one is just a simple share. Then maybe a couple of days later, you pull a quote out from it and do an Instagram post. And so what are some of the different ways that you're promoting a single piece of content?
So a single piece of content that gets published from CoSchedule, the first thing that will happen is when it goes live is we'll send 2 to 3 tweets. And that's about it, just to one channel. And in those tweets, they'll get staggered by about 20, 30 minutes up to an hour sometimes. But they're going to include 2 or 3 different headlines. Now, before we publish any blog post on our blog, and Nathan Ellering, who runs our content team, is our content marketing lead, has really implemented this process and formalized it. But we write 20 to 30 headlines for every single post before we choose one that works. We use the CoSchedule headline analyzer to kind of figure out, the likelihood of those 20 to 30 headlines to generate shares. So we like to choose something that's, I think, 70 to and 80 and above is kind of the score we shoot for. But we'll pick 3. We never assume that just because it got a good score means it's going to be perfect. So we picked a few of them, and we'll A/B test those. And after a couple hours, we'll take a look at some of the stats on those tweets and see which one was getting the best response. And then from there, that will actually be changed on the blog post. We'll actually change it on the fly if we need to and adjust that headline right away. From there, we use CoSchedule to schedule out when a post goes live. I think the initial schedule template that we use is about 68, 70 social shares to our Twitter channels, to our LinkedIn channels, Facebook pages, you name it, they all get it. And that's over time. I think that lasts at least 60 days. That'll get 60 to 90 days that those will get dripped out in a varying frequency. But that happens with every single post that we write. The other thing that happens is we have a segment of our email list that has subscribed to receiving daily email updates. So our entire list that has subscribed to that portion of it will get that email. And that's more of a text-based email. We keep those pretty simple. It's not a bunch of images. It's not a flashy newsletter. It's just, hey, we wrote this post. Here's the link. And here's a couple of the things that you might learn if you read this post. And we also do a content marketing update, which is sort of a summary email that will summarize all of the content that we have published that week, plus usually 1 or 2 of our favorite other posts, like this color post, for example, gets featured in that a few times. And that's called our content marketing update. So it's more of a newsletter style. So that happens once a week. So that's kind of the stuff that happens right away. And then we monitor it and we see how it goes. We kind of take the approach at CoSchedule that content is either going to make it or not make it. I think a lot of bloggers think of evergreen content as no matter what the results are, they just keep pushing it and sharing it and pushing it out there. And if we find a piece of content that's not performing as well as others, we'll either go back and rework it, or we'll just kind of set it to pasture and we'll focus our time on content that's doing better. So, but content that's doing really well, we'll actually go back and reschedule a bunch of different shares. We'll do tweaks to the headlines to get it out there. You asked about content types too, and I want to address that. So I think the templates that we use, which are it's a part of CoSchedule, what we do is we go through and we fill out 2 to 3 alternate headlines. We'll A/B test those, and sometimes we'll do additional shares with those. But we'll do a pull quote from the post. We'll do a question. Sometimes if there's a statistic or a stat that we can pull or an analytic of some kind, we'll pull that out and that'll be featured on a series of messages. And we do something controversial, a controversial type of statement, here's why no one is using email anymore and you should stop too. It's kind of a little bit of controversy in there or some mystery in that. And there's probably some other ones. I think something if there's an influencer in there or we've referenced somebody, we'll pull something like that out. But it's usually 5 or 6 different types of social shares that get spread out across that 60 or 70 messages that we schedule.
That is a ton of... I had it on mute there for some reason. I don't know why. I must have knocked it with my hand. Anyway, yeah, so that is a ton of information there. So let me just go back over because I was squiggling notes, hurriedly there. So... to start off with, you send out 2 or 3 tweets just to gauge your headline. Sorry, previous to that, you're writing sort of 20, 30 different headlines for the same article that you then tweet a couple of your, the ones that you think are going to best perform, and you see which is getting the most shares. Now, obviously, the problem with that is you have to have a bit of an audience to get a critical mass, I guess.
Yeah, you can also extend the amount of time that you run that test. If you have a smaller audience, what you may want to do is, I think the first thing is really start thinking of your content, and I think this is kind of a theme of this discussion so far, is think of your content as a long-term piece, right? So if you're of a smaller audience, maybe you need to send out a series of tweets or Facebook posts over 3 or 4 days or a week. That might be one way to do it. Another great way to do the A/B testing is actually use email. We used to never send out an email without A/B testing it, and we may still do it. The content team probably still does it, where we'll A/B test headlines and subject lines in our emails, and we use Campaign Monitor, so it will automatically pick the winner, and then the rest of the list will get that. So even if you only have a couple hundred people in your email list, or 50 people in your email list, you can do some basic A/B testing that way.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea, especially with the the A/B testing in the subject line of the email, definitely. So once you've run that, you then on the fly adjust the headline of the article or the piece of content, and then you're going to set up a schedule of sort of 70 social channel posts ranging from LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, etc. So that, because a lot of people think they're just going to send out the one tweet and the whole world's going to be online ready to read their piece of content. It just doesn't happen, does it?
No, it's we call it the one and done social media plan. It's not usually very good.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it's easy, and I think there's lots of little tools that can do that for you, and they'll send out a tweet quick once you go live. So it makes it easy for people to do it. So
yeah, definitely. I think there's WordPress plugins that will just send it when you publish it, and as you say, the one and done. That's a great phrase. So once you've done that, you're then obviously sending out to the people that have opted in for your daily digest or your daily email updates or your weekly digest. And then you're going to also mix your content posts up by different content types. So you might pull a quote out of it, you might pull a question, a stat, a controversial statement, or indeed an influencer piece as well. So if anyone hasn't got any ideas and their brain is not buzzing from all that information, you need to rewind on this podcast and just listen over that again, because that's some incredible information there. So you said about I was interested in there in the Coach Edgell headline analyzer. We use it at More Demand, and it is a fantastic tool. So why do you think headlines matter so much?
Oh, why don't they matter? I mean, you think about every single piece of media that you interact with and how you make decisions on what you're going to consume. When you go to a restaurant and you're sitting at the table and you got 2 seconds to pop into your email and pick which ones you're going to read. How do you make that decision? You make it based on this little tiny bite-sized piece of information. It may be the person sending it, or it may be a subject line. So bite-sized information is important there. When you're flying through a Twitter feed or your Facebook news feed, what are the things that attract you and cause you to stop and click and think? And it's our daily media is constantly being narrowed down into these very small bite-sized pieces of information. So headlines matter a whole lot, and for those types of reasons. I think the other thing is that they have the ability to strike an emotional chord with us. There's headlines that make you feel like, oh, well, I should be doing this because I'm not, they'll kind of make you feel like you're not doing something that you should be doing, and that may cause you to take action and click through. They'll create demand, so to speak. They will allow you to sometimes feel confirmation that what you're doing and the way you think is correct, because this person is saying that it is, so I'm going to click through, and I can identify that. So they have an emotional root to them that cause people to connect with them, and when you can connect with people emotionally like that, that's what causes them to take action.
Yeah, because the headline analyzer on Coach Edgell, again, it will be in the show notes for you. It has sort of a few sections that it breaks a headline down into, and one of them is emotional words. Another one is power words, and then you've got uncommon words as well as common words. So, it just breaks that down and analyzes it. So, is the sort of the focus to focus on those emotional and power words to really just jump off the page, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. And those are the words that are, most likely to create action. We also look at like the type of structure of a headline, list posts versus questions, punctuation and some of those types of things. And when you look at the headline analyzer, common words and stuff and uncommon words aren't bad. But and you have to have them in order to make a sentence. So we actually do rank you based on the appearance of common and uncommon words. But so you can't have you could write a headline that would get all power words, but we probably wouldn't necessarily grade it super well either. So we're trying to, as much as we can, to look at the whole sentence. And maybe it'll help, your audience to know how we develop that headline analyzer. And I think, understanding that CoSchedule is a tool that allows you to schedule blog and social media content in one place. We connect directly to WordPress, and we'll pull your blog post in. You can schedule out all of your WordPress content on an editorial calendar and create a series of social media messages that will then go forward to promote that blog post when it goes live. And we have a really great interface, where we allow you to save a ton of time scheduling out those 60, 70 social messages that I just talked about. We just released a feature yesterday called Social Templates that literally allows you to apply all of those social messages with a single click and save a ton of time. So we try to make that process really, really easy. But because of what we did, we ended up with this huge database of blog headlines and then data about how many social shares those blog posts received. And we started really digging into it, about a year or so ago when we hit 1 million headlines in our database. And I wrote a bunch of guest posts, and there's a bunch of that stuff out there if you want to look at some of our research. But what we did is we started making correlations between the types of blog posts that we saw and their headlines, and then how they performed with social shares. And you learn really interesting things, like these little words and phrases that people use in headlines that matter. You learn about list posts and how they perform so well, but only if they're within a certain length. You learn about the value of question marks in post, or just the order of phrases. So we tried to take that data that we were finding and seeing, and we used some other data that was out there to build an algorithm that essentially looks at a sentence and says, okay, this is a grade that you receive based on the quality of that headline and its likelihood to result in social shares. And we break out keywords for SEO. We show you kind of what it's going to look like in an email inbox, and just try to give you a full report on how we feel that headline will produce.
Yeah, and it is a fantastic tool. We literally use it every single time we write a headline. So and reference it to all our clients as well. And it's really interesting that it's backed by data rather than just Coach Edgell's theory on what a headline should look like. So it's nice that it's backed by data as well. Definitely. Yeah,
it definitely is.
With that, should you be, do you think, using different headlines in different social channels? So, for example, if I was creating a Facebook ad or a Facebook post, is the audience on there slightly different to maybe LinkedIn? And how would you write headlines for those different platforms? Or is that even something that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I would say it probably does vary, and I think knowing how we're scheduling and sending things, we definitely do things a little differently. The biggest thing probably is on Facebook, we don't just share a headline and the status of the message. We'll actually probably write something a little bit more in depth out, not super lengthy, obviously, but maybe it will be able to include a full sentence or a pull quote or something like that. So I think there's definitely customization that you want to do for each network, and headlines are, if you're sending out a link post on Facebook, for example, the headline is still very heavily prominent there, and it's a really big part of the share, and it's actually in the portion of the Facebook post where they're going to click. So headlines are really important in that space, but they're not necessarily always the entire message that you're sending. LinkedIn is a little different. You can get away a little bit more with headlines there, or headlines only. But I think, yes, you do want to think about that. However, the only thing I would say is I tend to try and try not to get too bogged down in some of those smaller things. Think about, and we talk about it as a team a lot, 10x versus 10% growth. Yes, we're spending a whole bunch of time really figuring out exactly what type of message works the best on LinkedIn versus Facebook versus Google Plus versus Twitter is not an invaluable exercise. I'm sure there's differences, and I'm sure there's improvements that even we could make in making our content stickier on each of those platforms. But you have to kind of correlate, okay, how many more clicks, how much more traffic, how many more email signups could we get by doing that versus some of the other things that we could be spending our time on. So what I would say is some of that customization, if you go too far with it, that's a 10% improvement. It's not bad, but it's not going to make you grow. So if there's something else that's a 10x improvement that might make your audience grow by 10 times, those are the types of activities you want to be concentrating on the most and letting some of those other things go on the back burner, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. 10x versus 10% growth. That is just, a thing that you can apply to so much in business, not just your content writing, but everything in the business is, how you're divvying up your time. We've all got 24 hours in a day, and how you divvy that up to make, the best use of it possible. Would, doing 3 more podcasts instead of just tweaking the titles, reach more people? Yes, it would. So I would focus on doing, 3 more podcasts over spending, maybe 2 hours, tweaking headlines. So that's a fantastic point. So I just wanted to sort of bring the conversation back to, you're this one person marketing team, but you're looking to expand and maybe take the next step in your content marketing and to, maybe get the sort of first hire in terms of a content writer, or maybe it's an editor. I mean, how did you do it at Coach Edgell from writing, the articles yourself to then pushing, making your team that bit bigger?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in the marketing team, it was just me, and I would have my co-founder proofread, and mediocre job at best most of the time on the proofreading. There, by the way, is a 10% thing. If somebody at CoSchedule, even to this day, emails us about a proofreading or a spelling error or a grammar issue on one of our blog posts, we do not take the time to go back and fix it. We look at that as a 10% improvement, and we'd rather spend our time on 10x things. So, and a good example there of how that can influence your thinking. But my first hire was a writer, and she came in and in some cases would be writing topics that I had started a little bit or gave her some notes on, and in other cases she would write topics top to bottom. And for a number of years, me and her took turns back and forth publishing content. I would take one day, she would take the next, and we'd do a couple posts a week, and it allowed me just to kind of double our output and allow me to focus on other areas of the business. So that was the first step, is just, and she also would eventually took over most of the social media scheduling, well, pretty much all the social media scheduling and some of those types of things. So that was step one in terms of hiring for us.
Yeah, and that's a great first step to take that weight off your shoulders in terms of then being able to focus back on the business again, maybe the product development, etc. So, what does your team look like now from the sort of content marketing and digital marketing side of things? What does the team makeup look like now?
Yeah, so the content team, if you would include myself, is for 5 of us. So we have Nathan is our content marketing lead, and he really runs strategy in terms of what content we're picking and publishing. He's the guy with all of his awesome spreadsheets talking about, okay, this topic, these were the keywords, this were the number of social shares, this is the number of page views, this is the number of email signups, and we're getting into where these are the number of trial signups for CoSchedule that we actually received, and starting to really look at what topics that we're covering are driving the best activity on our site and into our application, and really working on that funnel. And of course, he was our second hire in content and really has taken over how we choose topics and what gets published, and done an amazing job with it. We have 2 content marketers that work on SEO strategy. They work on our social media publishing strategy. They're writing articles. They're working with guest authors. They're doing the work every single day to make sure that we have a blog post a couple times a week, sending emails, that kind of thing. We have Ashton as our graphic designer, and she does does all of the graphics for our blog, ebooks. With every single post, we include a download, PDF download of some kind. It's usually sometimes a checklist, a resource guide, an infographic, but something that you can have as a takeaway and carry with you. And then me, I kind of come in high level strategy. I write for our product blog, and starting to more and more cover some of our thought leadership, I guess, in terms of how we approach content marketing for startups and for entrepreneurs and really any marketing team that's out there. So
a 5-person marketing team is absolutely awesome, and the amount of what they're outputting from I'm a reader of the blog, I'm a downloader of the lead magnets, I'm in your sales funnel without a doubt, and having that content there, it definitely helps out even marketers that think they know their stuff. That's the sort of level that Coach Edgell is pumping out, to take everyone from the beginner level to the intermediate to the advanced, just to that next step in their journey. And I think that's so important about how you connect and resonate with your own audience. So would you attribute your success in Coach Edgell, if you think you are at a success stage, to mainly content marketing, or has success or sign-ups come from a completely different area, like just paid ads, for example?
Yeah. Marketing wise, the success of CoSchedule is 100% in content. We've definitely done paid ads. We've done, podcast sponsorships. We've done some Facebook ads, some remarketing. We've tried it all, but none of it is scaled to anywhere the degree that our content has. And I would say on a weekly basis, it's still our number one source of new signups. And there are people that will have been on our email list for maybe a year or two. It's not like it's happening all overnight, but our content allows us to create relationships with audience members that could potentially be customers, and we're totally happy and thrilled to help them along that journey, and just learning how to do good social media, understanding the science behind headlines, sharing the tips that I was talking about with you today on how to just publish consistently, and those types of things are what cause people to trust and rely and assume positive things with the CoSchedule brand, and then that goes into our software. At the end of the day, our number one contributor to success is the quality of the tool itself, and that people love the tool and it gives them results. So you have to have that as well. But from a marketing standpoint, content marketing, we're all in for sure.
Awesome. So to wrap up nicely, you just spoke about the tool there. This is the opportunity for the pitch for Coach Edgell, I guess, and where they could find out more about yourself and how to connect with you.
Yeah, you definitely find more about me on Twitter at Garrett_Moon or at CoSchedule, and we tweet a bunch of tips and our content that way. CoSchedule is a editorial calendar and social media tool. So we allow you to manage all of your marketing, and a lot of this conversation focused on blog and social media, but we do cover all sides of content marketing, ebooks, email marketing, and stuff can all be planned on a single editorial calendar where you can interact with your team, or you can work alone as a solo blogger. But essentially, CoSchedule was built around the exact process that I've been talking about here. I started doing it at a small marketing agency, didn't find the tools that I wanted to make me successful doing it, and that's kind of what gave us the idea for building CoSchedule in the first place. So we help you plan your content. We help you create it and do it on time and do it consistently. And then we help you create the social media plan and marketing that you're going to need to promote it. And we also make sure that space is the same place that you're planning other things. If you're doing podcasting, it's a great place to plan and schedule that out. If you're doing email marketing and stuff like that, it can be used for that as well. So it really becomes sort of an all-in-one tool for content marketing and inbound marketing.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Garrett, for joining us today. And listeners, honestly, if you go and have a look at the CoSchedule stuff, the blog is awesome. The headline analyzer, if that's your one takeaway from today, go and check that out as well. The guys there are awesome. So thanks very much for joining me on the More Demand podcast, Garrett.
Yeah, it was It's a great conversation, great questions. I had a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem at all. And that's it for this episode of the More Demand podcast. We'll make sure to see you next Wednesday.
Thanks for listening to the More Demand podcast. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on iTunes and get the latest episode direct to your device every Wednesday.